Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's good to have you with us today. And this is the biweekly Safe Passage for Children webinar. And we are really excited today to have Maya Schulte with us for the webinar. And I think I speak on behalf of Stephanie and myself that to say that we're both very excited to have Maya working with us as a colleague this year. And she is doing so as an Ireland Fellow from the University of St. Thomas School of Law. And this is courtesy of a very substantial grant from our longtime supporters, Kathleen Grant and Greg Page. So the major goals of this Ireland Justice Fellows Program are increasing access to justice and having an impact on public policies. So this project with Maya was designed with those goals in mind. Now, Maya may wish to share a lot more details about her background herself, but I will share that she graduated from law school last year in 2021 and was recently admitted to the bar. So congratulations on that. Maya's previous experience includes working with justice-involved Indigenous women who are victims of domestic violence, as well as clerking for the Ramsey County Public Defender's Office. And Maya, you have the distinction of drawing the largest registration for the 2021-22 webinar season and series. So, you know, don't let that go to your head though, along with being admitted to the bar, because we need you to stay focused for like at least another 6 months or so. So what Maya's going to do today is share her preliminary findings. We're about halfway through this project from her research on child fatalities in Minnesota from child abuse and neglect. And it's for the period from late 2014 to the present. We chose that time frame because the last such inventory was done by Brandon Stahl. Many of you are familiar with his work. He was then at the Star Tribune, and he did a hugely influential survey on child fatalities in Minnesota from the period of about 2006 to 2014. So we're continuing that work. So a couple of other pieces of business before I let Maya get going here. And one is that I don't want to forget to invite you to the first Safe Passage for Children open house, which is going to be on Saturday, June 4th at the St. Paul Highland Park Pavilion from 3 to 8 p.m. It's going to be featuring our own Stephanie McCorkle's band, May North. And it's going to be a family-friendly and we hope warm, we hope no snow, warm outdoor event where you can meet many other individuals like yourself who are interested in the welfare of children. And you can go to our website and find where to register for that. And then our following presentations next time, 2 weeks from now, we are excited to have Dr. Monica Luciana from the Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but this is a huge new facility that's brought together everybody who's anybody from the U of M around primarily early childhood development, birth to 3, and then adolescent children. It's an enormous brain trust. We're very lucky to have this whole new facility here in Minnesota. I've been anxious to have someone come and just walk us through all of the things that they are doing. If you are ever on West River Road and go by the old Masonic Hospital, they've completely redone that building with an open architecture, and maybe someday we can even get a tour of it. And then our final one for this season is going to be Mary Pat Lee, who's the executive director of the Minneapolis Crisis Nursery. And that'll be the last one until we're going to take a summer break and start back up again with a new series in the fall. Unless a lot of stuff happens that is still kind of in the mix at the legislative session, then we might have a final wrap up of the legislative session if there's enough. Hopefully there'll be enough to talk about. We'll do one of the what just happened webinars at that point. So that's the introduction. And with that, Maya, I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you run with it and tell us what your experience has been so far in this project.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rich, for that nice introduction. I think his description of my background is sufficient, but if anyone has questions at the end, feel free to ask about that.
Oh, I should say, we generally hold questions till the end, but you can put stuff in the chat box. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that.
Good point. So like Rich said, I have been working on this project involving child fatalities in Minnesota for the last 6 months. We're about halfway through, but I've been working on this. This is the only thing I've been working on for this specific with Safe Passage. So I'm really excited to share what I've been working on and hear your comments or questions. So I'm going to, okay. So as just a broad idea of the project objectives, the purpose of the project is to better understand the factors related to child deaths from maltreatment. And we're particularly interested in policies and practice related to family preservation and family assessment. We also want to pay close attention to how these practices and policies disproportionately, or how there's a disproportionate representation of families and children of color. And our goal is to identify where improved resources or changes in these policies and practices could reduce the rate of child fatalities from maltreatment. So in terms of our methods, we identified 87 child fatality cases in Minnesota from the end of 2014 to the present. And Rich did a good job explaining why that is our chosen timeframe. So it ends up being about October of 2014 up until now. And we, so each case will eventually be coded into a very large spreadsheet that corresponds to a coding manual that we had developed at the beginning of this project. The spreadsheet has 84 elements to be coded. So coding one case is kind of, or it's, you know, can take quite a bit of time. In terms of what data we are using to code these cases, we are obtaining data from the public court records accessible through MNCIS, and then also we are getting fatality reports from the counties pursuant to a Minnesota statute, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. Then I also just wanted to mention to maintain inter-rater reliability, so to make sure we're, you know, coming up with reliable data, we're having 30% of these cases will be coded by 2 people. Greg is a coder who's, I believe, is in this meeting, and Veronica, who is a student from Hamlin University. She's also helping us code cases, and Rich as well. So as I mentioned, this is the statute that we use in order to, that we have been using in order to request fatality information from the counties. So under this statute, Minnesota counties are required to disclose a written summary of the information they have on a child fatality or near fatality. If a person was criminally charged with having caused the fatality, if a person would have been criminally charged but for that person's death. So these are usually murder-suicide cases. And then the third one is or a child protection investigation resulted in a determination of maltreatment. And the required disclosures, so what the county is supposed to include in their summary to us, they include the age and gender of the child, cause and circumstances regarding the fatality, information on previous reports of maltreatment, so basically the CPS history on the family, and the result of any child mortality review. I wanted to briefly go through the areas of analysis, so basically what those 84 elements are in our spreadsheet, or what, you know, we want to code these cases for. Obviously, the biggest area of analysis with this project is the family's history with child protection. So we're looking at the deceased child's, like, their entire family history. We're looking at the frequency of family assessment or investigation. So how many times the family was assigned a family assessment, how many times they were assigned to the investigative track. We're looking at who the subject of the report, or who's the subject of the report. So whether it's the deceased child's siblings, or both. And then we're also tracking the disposition. So what ended up happening or coming out of the family assessment or investigation. We're looking into the living arrangement at the time of the fatality. So who was, who are all the players involved, as well as prior removal from the home if the child or their siblings was ever removed from the home. And then also the type of maltreatment that occurred in the family and any indication of old trauma. So that would be, when they perform the autopsy or when the child's brought into the hospital, any indication that there was healing trauma or indication that the child had been abused prior to the incident, the fatality incident. So apart from the big areas looking at digging into child protection history, we also are just coding general demographic information. So race and gender of both the child and the perpetrator or the parents. We're coding whether ICWA applies, which is the Indian Child Welfare Act. So whether it's under tribal jurisdiction. We are coding the party's relationship to the child. And then apart from that, the 4 ones underneath the demographic information is kind of, big categories of risk factors that we know are, occurring often with child abuse. So we're coding whether there was the perpetrator or the parents had substance abuse issues. We are looking into domestic violence. So instances of where one of the parents was charged with a domestic assault. We're tracking OFPs, which are order for protections, and domestic abuse no contact orders, also known as DANCOs. And we're also tracking how often they're violating those protective orders. We are also coding for other criminal history that we think is an important part of the piece of the puzzle in that, or at least contributes to, well, basically the other criminal history that we're tracking is other crimes against children, whether it be neglect or maltreatment or failure to protect. Sex crimes, and then other violent crimes. And then the last one I have on there is animal abuse. As we know, animal abuse can be associated with child abuse. So as I explained, I wanted to go through the difference between family assessment or investigation. And I know some of you are probably familiar with this already, but I want to run through it because it's really important to this project. So when a report of child maltreatment comes in, the report can either be assigned to a family assessment response or a family investigation. An investigation is much more typical of, or it's the more traditional response to child protection. So what you think of when a report is made to child protection services. And this from the DHS website, they said it's used in response to serious reports of child abuse and neglect, including cases where children are in imminent risk of harm. Whereas as the family assessment response is used in response to reports not involving substantial child endangerment, sexual abuse, or situations of serious danger. So in other words, family assessment is supposed to be for more low risk instances of child maltreatment. And the basic idea of family assessment and why states have been pushing to implement more family assessment type responses in child protection is, the whole point was supposed to be that it's supposed to be more of a supportive relationship, or less of an adversarial relationship between the child protection worker and the family. So coming up with a response to the report that more so fits the family's needs. So it seems when you look at the goals of family assessment, it seems like it would be a really positive thing, but in practice, there are a lot of issues, or there's several things that are problematic about family assessment response. So I wanted to highlight those. The first one being family assessment is voluntary. So the family can essentially refuse services, and that, kind of ends things from there. Whereas that's not the case in investigation. They had to follow through with everything in investigation. There's no determinations of maltreatment in family assessment. So again, with an investigation, there's going to be a determination as to whether that child is in need of protection or whether maltreatment occurred. None of those same determinations are made in a family assessment. Then there are other, other safeguards put in place with the investigation track are not in place with the family assessment, including interviewing the children. So if the children are interviewed, it's often in the presence of their parents, who are, oftentimes the alleged abusers. So going off of the last slide, we, as I explained the difference between family assessment and investigation, we wanted to really concentrate on the family assessment side of things. So when these families are being assigned to family assessment, we are using this chart, which comes from the 2000 DHS Alternative Response Guidelines. So this is what DHS puts out, or this is what they did previously use in order to make a determination of whether or not a family should be put down the family assessment or the family investigation track. So I'm showing you this all because I kind of wanted to put you in the position of a coder, as this is included in the coding manual for the coders to look at, to compare. So for every instance in which a family is assigned to family assessment, they're going to be using this chart to see if any of the 16 factors apply to the situation, which would mean that it may have been inappropriately assigned. So there's 16 factors. I highlighted a few of them that we see kind of often. The alleged perpetrator has previously been charged with offenses posing potential child harm, or the frequencies, similarities of past reports warrant a traditional investigation. A lot of these also are just involve a lot of discretion, or, like a judgment call. And so I just, want to highlight the fact that these are coming from, the termination is being made from a single call, someone calling in reporting child maltreatment, and they need to make a determination just based on that call. And the next few slides I'm going to show you are examples from cases that are actual real cases from this project. So I want you to just keep in mind some of these things off of this chart as we go through those. And as I said, so these are real cases from included in our study. And so the end result in all of these is that the child ended up being killed. So example 1, CPS conducted a family assessment after receiving a report of father grabbing child 1 by the arm and causing a scratch. It was further reported just before this happened, mother and father were arguing about father's constant threat to smack child 1, as well as father making fun of child 1 for child 1's weight. So this was assigned a family assessment. This, description alone doesn't seem too problematic or raise any red flags. But if you look at the family's history with CPS, I think it becomes a little bit more problematic, or, raises some areas of concern. So the CPS history with this family before that before that report was made was 3 investigations and 1 family assessment. 2 of those investigations were for reports of neglect, 1 investigation for a report of sexual abuse, and then 1 family assessment regarding a report of neglect. Some other information on the case: there was a lot of domestic violence involved. There was multiple order for protections and domestic abuse no contact orders against the father. And the mother twice had signed a safety plan saying that she wouldn't allow father back into the home. But the father ended up killing the child. So obviously that safety plan was not followed through. Example number 2, CPS conducted a family assessment after receiving a report alleging disregard for child safety when the child was left with her drunken grandmother. Another family assessment was conducted after their mother got into a car accident and was convicted of DWI with the child in the car. And then a 3rd family assessment after allegations of physical abuse of child by mother's boyfriend. Child's father, so this is different from the boyfriend. Child's father took a video of child with 2 bruises on her cheek, and in the video, the child tells the father that the boyfriend punched her in the face. This child was beaten to death by the mother's boyfriend 4 months after the last family assessment. So with this specific family, there was 4 total reports made to CPS. 1 was screened out, and then the 3 were sent down the family investigative track. So the family was never investigated. I also included even some of the injuries that were reported in the criminal complaint for the perpetrator in this matter. I just think that this is one of the most serious cases we have, or the trauma and abuse this child received is, horrific. Her kidney was split in half, pancreas split in 2, lacerations to stomach, small intestine, liver, and then there was multiple reports of healing, rib fractures and other fractures as well. Other information similar to the last one: the mother had signed a safety plan saying that there would be no contact with the boyfriend and the child. Something interesting that I wanted to pull out about this case as well is the boyfriend was a minor at the time of the incident. He was 17 years old, and he also happened to be the subject of significant child protection history when he was a child. So him and his mom were very involved in the system when he was growing up. And so I think it just highlights a good example of the cycle of abuse and, how it can really have impacts years on or years later. Example 3, CPS conducted a family assessment after receiving a report alleging neglect following a domestic altercation between mother and father with 2 of the children present. CPS conducted a family assessment after receiving a report alleging neglect of child 1 and child 6 due to failure to provide necessary medical care. The children had been brought in to the hospital after being involved in a car accident. The mother arrived at the hospital, refused treatment for the children, and removed the children from the hospital against medical advice. So both of those reports were assigned a family assessment, and previous history with the family before those reports were made. There was 2 previous investigations, one of which resulted in the mother being criminally charged and convicted with malicious punishment of a child. So, I highlight all these examples just as, to kind of get your mind moving on, how using these examples could be compared to that chart that I showed you at the beginning, just because a lot of the 16 factors listed in that chart are shown in these examples. So I think it's a good way of highlighting the problems we continue to see. Where we are at right now, as Rich said, we're about 50% done with the coding process. We're about halfway through coding the cases. I'm currently coding cases myself and compiling case files to hand off to other coders. I'm still corresponding with counties to get fatality reports. Currently, we have 50 child fatality reports. So we're still missing a good chunk. But I'm also happy about the number of reports we have received. And then in terms of a project timeline, we hope to finish coding the cases by the end of May and have time to do our data analysis and have a written report on conclusions and findings. So the next few slides, I am going to provide some preliminary findings and common patterns and themes that I'm seeing as I'm working through these cases. But I just wanted to preface that, we have not completed coding every single case. And so there's not too much of a solid set of like quantitative data that I can share because we just are not at that point. So yeah, I just want you to keep that in mind, and I don't want anyone saying, well, you said this back at the webinar, and that's not true in the final findings. So preliminary data on the 87 cases so not all 87 of these cases have been coded, but I was able to pull a couple of the easier elements. So of the 87 cases, I was able to pull the who was responsible for that child fatality or who was charged. So of the 87 cases, 29 of those cases, the father was criminally charged for the child's death. In 23 of the cases, it was the mother. 18 cases, the mother's partner was criminally charged. 8 cases, a foster mother or father or both were charged. And then in 9 cases, it was a daycare provider or a babysitter who was criminally charged for the child's death. Then I also was able to break it down by gender. So 60% of the deceased children are male, 40% of the deceased children are female. And then I also, this information that I have on this slide, so it's frequency of known CPS report. This information is just from the cases that I have coded so far that have child protection history. So it's not a huge sample size because we have not coded every case. But so basically out of the cases we have coded, 35% of those cases had 1 to 2 reports to CPS. 30% of the cases had 3 to 4 reports. 30% had 5 to 6. And then 5% had over 6 reports. I also thought it would be interesting just to, talk through some of the common patterns and themes we are seeing. The first one being domestic violence. So whether it be domestic violence between the parents or the parent and another individual, we're seeing a lot that this ends up becoming a reason for a CPS report. And I actually think this is a good thing. It's indicating that law enforcement is cross-reporting the information to child protection services, which is, something that we want. It's probably not occurring as much as we would like it to happen, but I think it's a good sign that we are seeing it. Substance use is another common pattern, substance use among the perpetrator who committed the fatality, as well as the mom, or sometimes it's, significant substance use between the couple that really gets out of hand. So that's been a reoccurring theme. Another one is the perpetrator providing childcare while mother is at work. I've noticed that one of the most common narratives in these cases is the mom going to work or the mom being at work and having someone, the boyfriend, a babysitter, the husband being primarily responsible for the child. And that's when these are occurring or the abuse happens, and then eventually the fatality. I also mentioned inconsistencies with charging mothers. I have noticed that a lot of these cases have similar facts or almost identical facts, where the mom is aware of the abuse that was going on. There's documentation that she admits to being aware. There's text messages between the mom and the dad, or so basically I'm seeing cases where these moms are doing very similar things, and in one case a mom's charged, in the other case she's not charged. I just think it's been interesting. Another thing would be more leniency in sentencing mothers. We are tracking the perpetrators, if any plea agreement is reached, and the perpetrator's sentence, and whether it's within the Minnesota sentencing guidelines. And I have noticed that mothers are more likely to be sentenced within the Minnesota sentencing guidelines, or in the alternative, they are more likely to receive a downward departure, meaning they're sentenced to less time than the sentencing guidelines call for. I've noticed a lot of conversations surrounding these. The court's argument there is that the mom is amenable to probation. A lot of it's usually surrounding like her substance use, or she expresses a lot of sympathy, or is really distraught about what happened, wants to change her life for the better, those type of things. And I feel like the court is more likely to hear the mother on those arguments, and it's reflected in her sentence. Oops. Then, based off of some of these preliminary findings, I did want to provide one more example. It's kind of a lengthier one, but I think it does a good job explaining some of these problems. So this is just one family. The first report alleged that mother was pregnant and abusing alcohol when she was 9 months pregnant. The report was screened out by reason of unborn child. A second report alleging physical abuse, threatening injury to child 1 by the alleged father and maternal uncle, as well as domestic assault of the mother by the father. The report was screened in for investigation. After that, there was another report that mother was pregnant and using alcohol, but again, it was screened out for reasons of unborn child. Another report received that father brought child 1 to the doctor, and that when she made a noise, he covered her mouth and face for about 1 minute to quiet her. The report was screened out because there was no allegations that the child was struggling to breathe. Then the final report was CPS received a report when the mother gave birth to child 2 due to the mother's history of alcohol abuse. But again, the report was screened out because the mother denied alcohol use, and the medical notes in the case indicated that mother smelled of alcohol at a prenatal visit and not on the day that she gave birth. So the child died 2 days after, or 2 weeks, 2 weeks after the child was born. The mother was co-sleeping with the child and was intoxicated and rolled over the child. And again, I pulled this one because I think it shows substance use, domestic violence, how Child Protection Services deal with, or how, the specific county dealt with these issues, and how, the child ended up dying, and, had they been investigated more, that could have been prevented, that death could have been prevented. Lastly, I just wanted to go into issues that we have run into and continue to run into, because I think it's kind of part of the larger theme, in that, collecting all this information and getting all the right data has been really difficult. It involves, a lot of different people being on board, which is not necessarily the case. So I just wanted to run through issues we've run into. The first one being an ICWA case, so Indian Child Welfare Act. Some of those cases were handled exclusively under tribal jurisdiction, so we're not able to access the court records through MNCIS, and we're not able to request data from the tribe like we would from the county using that statute. A huge area that we have been dealing with is the statutory language of Minnesota Statute 260E. So the one I had showed earlier, a big one being inconsistencies across counties in what data is provided to us. A problem we keep seeing is the child's name being redacted or deleted from the fatality report. And basically the problem there is when you look at the statute, Minnesota Statute 260E, the child's name is not included as a required disclosure. So the counties aren't required to disclose the child's name. But, you know, we are the ones who are asking for the information with the child's name. So, you know, we know the child's name. It's public information. You could Google it, or you can look up information in the media on these families, or you could go to the courthouse and look up information on MNCIS. So basically, we just have run into the issue that, you know, the child's in the family's information can be confidential as it applies to this statute, even though it's not necessarily confidential in other situations. So it's been tough for us to figure out how to deal with that. The second one was another thing we run into with, you know, getting different information from the counties. Some counties have taken the statutory language and kind of came up with their own way of defining certain words. So the actual statutory language of the statute says that they had to disclose child protection histories with child protection services that are pertinent to the maltreatment that led to the fatality. Most counties have taken that to mean any CPS history, they're going to report it to us. But some counties are choosing to say that the CPS history with the family is not pertinent to the maltreatment that led to the fatality, even though we can go and see the public record that the family did have significant child protection history. But the county's kind of deciding that it's not pertinent. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention on that was another required disclosure under the statute is that counties tell us about the results of any mortality review that was conducted. And in 19 of the 50 child fatality reports we have, that part is left blank, or it says reach out to the Department of Human Services for the state review, or it usually gives some reason as to why there's no mortality review conducted. And with these issues we've run into, we have made good progress with DHS. We have finally kind of reached an agreement where they're hopefully going to provide us with information that we're not receiving from the counties, or, you know, gaps and stuff that we're seeing. And so, yeah, we've been really happy that we're kind of finally making some headway with DHS, because having them on board would make things a lot easier. Another big thing that's made this project difficult would be inconsistencies across counties and how they're handling these matters. So just confusion surrounding the procedural process for reporting a child fatality to DHS. It was pretty much different than we had originally anticipated. So that's been raised a whole bunch of issues. Also inconsistencies in child protection or CPS terminology. It seems that not all counties are using the same terminology or the correct, what CPS workers are trained to use in terms of the dispositions of family assessments or investigations and that type of thing. And then lastly, screened out reports. So, some counties are including screened out reports, but we also know that there's going to be a lot of screened out reports that we'll miss. So that's kind of something we have had on the back of our mind as well. And I believe that ends it. Yes. So now I would love to hear questions and comments.
So again, you can just, raise your voice and pop in and ask a question, or you can put something in the chat box. I think one of the things, though, that we anticipated just to start it off is that we've seen inconsistencies in the way that counties operate across a lot of different areas. And we're really seeing that here, as Maya's explained, that some counties, they're required to do a fatality review report and send it to the state. And some counties haven't even done that, or they've said, well, ask the state for it. And the state has said, well, ask the county for it. And so that's a really basic requirement on these that they're not doing. And so this will kind of uncover that inconsistency. And as Maya's indicated, we've been talking with the Department of Human Services about it and feel like we're making some progress in trying to clear that related issues up. And I think, so let me just open and see what kind of questions people have. I might throw in a couple comments as we go, we'll see, but does anybody just want to, jump in and ask a question? I can't really see everybody in this view. Okay, there's one from James Bradford III. Do you see it, Maya?
Yes, I'm just pulling it up. For the CPS reports public record at the main courthouse or a county or at the Family Justice Center of the county, they are great question. All the MNCIS terminals are the same, so you can go to any courthouse and access the child protection records.
You might want to explain what MNCIS is and what are the child protection records that are in it.
Yeah, so MNCIS is the big, the big system. That's in place to have all court records. So criminal, juvenile, family, civil, you name it. But normally, juvenile matters or CPS records are confidential, or they haven't always been public record. It's a fairly new-ish. Rich would know the date on that or what year that became public.
Well, maybe I can jump in on James' question too and add a little background. We had expected going into this that we would get most of our information from the counties, and they're required to, anytime a member of the public asks for a report on a child fatality, they're supposed to deliver it. And as you've heard, that hasn't always been that easy. But we thought we'd get most of our information from that. But it turns out we're getting, I don't know, Maya, 50% or more from the court records. And the interesting thing about the court records is, kind of what comes around, goes around, comes around, is that these records were made public because of Kathleen Blatz, who is the sponsor. She and her husband are the sponsors of this project. And Kathleen Blatz, at the time, was the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. And she just pushed this issue. And then when MNCIS, that state system, was being redone in 2016, and I actually worked on that system as part of my consulting work, they tried to, again, take those records behind the screen so the public can get them. And a number of us testified, myself, Brandon Stahl, and some others, and persuaded the Supreme Court to leave them available. So these are public records like any other crime, any other fatality. And we got, interestingly, probably more of the information for this report from the court system than we're getting from the counties, or at least 50-50. Would that be fair, Maya?
Yeah.
Just to clarify something though, too, the records being public through MNCIS are only those child protection records where there's a CHIPS petition filed. the vast majority of child protection investigations, assessment, and case management services do not result in any kind of juvenile court action, and they are not a matter of public record. Those are confidential files.
Right, so it has to go to court.
Yeah.
And Maya, can you take down your presentation so everybody can be on the screen? It's easy to do. There we go. Okay, there's another question there.
Where is it?
It's will the report be available publicly? Yes, our schedule is October to produce a final report, and then we will make it available publicly at that point.
I think you're muted, Judy, if you're talking. There we go.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry. So it sounds like all counties are not required to report child fatalities to DHS. Is that what you said?
Were you talking about Greg's comment?
No, just you had mentioned that all the inconsistencies in what counties need to do it's a glaring problem as far as I can see. But are they not all required to report child fatalities to DHS?
I think, see if I got this right, Maya, but I think they're all required to report. They're just not all compliant.
Yeah, that's more what
Right.
I'm seeing.
Yeah.
In that what's kind of been happening is I'll find a county that I'm corresponding with that seems kind of invested in our project, or will be like, thanks for doing this, or I'm interested to see the findings. And so then I will kind of pick that person's brain. Hey, what's the process for this? What happens when a child fatality occurs in your county? And a lot of them have been pretty forthcoming, like, the systems that are in place are not, I don't know, or I had to ask so-and-so, or like, just, I thought it would have been a very much more concrete, thing that was occurring. And that's what we thought going into it. But we've learned that there's not that many guidelines surrounding
Yeah, I'd
it.
speculate that they don't get requests like this very often. So it's sort of like, what is this? And they have to go and ask their county attorney and ask the director, and do we have to respond? And so it's like so many things in Minnesota. There's so little oversight by the state compared to other states who have county-run systems that everything gets made up, de novo when there's something new that pops into the system. So I would say, ironically, Judy, that I think counties have really been responsive. They've tried to do their best, but it's been like a new project for them, or a new issue for a lot of them, except for big ones like Hennepin and Ramsey. And conversely, on the Department of Human Services side, they have been much less forthcoming, and they've tried to keep everything behind the firewall. And they've been going around with their attorneys for months now about our requests and saying, well, we don't have to provide the public records that the county provides to us. You have to go get them from the county. We're not sharing. And then for a long time, they said, well, they didn't really know how many child fatalities that were out there until one county gave us a screenshot of their inventory. So they have an inventory of all the child fatalities that come in from the counties, but they were saying, we don't really know. So we shared the screenshot with them. They said, oh yeah, I guess we do have that. So now we've got, we're close to an agreement with them to share their inventory. So at least we can cross-check the names and see if we're missing anybody. That's about all it'll get us. And then any non-confidential information from these fatality review reports, which in counties are universally supposed to send up every time there's a fatality. So I think we may have opened things up a little bit, and for the future, it'll be a lot easier to find out information about fatalities.
So does the state not keep track of child fatalities either? I mean, can you not go to the state and ask for a list of child fatalities?
Well, they claimed that they didn't really have it until, as I say, this one county gave us a screenshot of their inventory. And they have this report, which is an inventory of all the fatalities. So we confronted them with that. And then they admitted that, yes, we do keep track of them. We just didn't, we just weren't about to share it with you, but now they say they will share it with us. So I think we broke open that particular, roadblock, and now hopefully for the future, it'll be a routine thing to share all, an inventory of fatalities in the state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's very disappointing. I mean, I would think it would be automatic.
Well,
anyone who dies in the state, they have to keep track of. Why would they not have a list of child fatalities?
well, of course, there's particular legal things that apply and policy things and practices that apply to child fatalities that, they should be keeping an inventory. And as it turns out, they were. But I think the relationship with the state has improved a lot on these kind of issues. We're working with them on a number of fronts right now, and they're sort of a little more willing to kind of come forth with and share information and negotiate on stuff. So I think this project and some other things we're doing in the legislative front have really, improved our relationship with the state and their willingness to kind of work with us on stuff. So I think it's made a significant difference there. And on that point, I don't want to take up all the time, but the state does have this very kind of state-of-the-art process for reviewing child fatalities. And it's based on the hospital industry and the airline industry's continuous quality improvement programs. And the idea is, okay, we don't want to go straight to blaming the county or the individual worker for mistake. We want to look at all the reasons that really led up to this and what are the systemic problems and what do we need to change in terms of practices. And I have a long background in terms of continuous quality improvement and public agencies. So I kind of know that this is a real thing and it's a legitimate, well done program. So at the state level, they review these fatalities and they apply this management improvement, set of tools. But what you would expect to see is that some of the obvious things that we're seeing would be changed. You'd see changes in practices, you'd see changes in policy. You would see, for example, what a lot of states do is say, you get one shot or two shots, maybe most at family assessment, then it goes down the investigation track, no more semi-voluntary, version of child protection. We're going to take this seriously. That by itself would probably prevent a bunch of deaths. There would be all these inconsistencies about reporting would come up. There would be something coming out saying, hey, we're going to standardize this process. So none of that's happened, which says to me that they've got a great machine going in terms of the management improvement program that they have, but it's not, the transmission is not connected to the wheels. It's not actually producing changes. So that's one of the conversations we want to have with them.
Thank you. So one more. So there's no limit to the number of times that a case is sent to family assessment that would trigger a switch to investigation. It doesn't matter how many times the family undergoes family assessment. I mean, clearly it gets worse and worse and worse, but it never automatically is triggered to investigation.
Yeah, I mean, that's my exact thought. You would think there would be something in place that if there's X amount of reports, it has to be an investigation, or if it's, but no,
Right.
That's the case.
Yeah, as I say, there's some states that have a kind of a policy that, you get one or two, trips down family assessment, and then we're going to treat it as a formal case.
Your second example, Maya, I think it was the second one where there was 3 family assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 months later, the child was killed by the boyfriend. That seems like a pretty big red flag.
Yeah, and that's why I included that. I thought that was a great example of exactly what Judy was talking about. You would think, and also what I didn't really mention about that case is it happened in a pretty small time frame. So it was kind of report after report. And then that last family assessment happened and the child died 4 months later.
And I think most people are kind of familiar with family assessment, but just to review, the practice in family assessment is, first of all, you give advance notice that the child protection worker is coming. So we know from many cases that there's intimidation and coaching that goes on during that period of time, 3 or 4 days. One of our closest supporters her mother used to take her and her sister and lock them in the shed for several days and then take them out and clean them up before child protection got there and say, you better watch them. Those are stories that we hear. So the advance notice by itself is a safety issue. Then they are still interviewing children in front of the alleged perpetrator, which, I think it's obvious you're not going to get the child to see what's going on if there's something serious going on. And in terms of fact finding, the Child Welfare Training Institute is now training workers in how to do fact finding, but there is no requirement to do it. And the testimony that we heard back in the Governor's Task Force in 2015 was from social workers, well, we're told to go out and say, we're not here to ask questions, we're just here to offer services. Now, I can't say that that's still the practice. It certainly wasn't the practice in all counties, because I think, Greg knows, as having been in Hennepin County for 40 years, that they were more, they had more of a professional process there. But the point is, it's all over the place, but most of these are real safety issues for the children. By the time, they're done with the family assessment, they really don't have much information unless unless the parents kind of offer it up. And so you don't know if the children are safe. You don't know how they're doing and what their status is. So that's how these repeated family assessments get to the point where all of a sudden the child is dead.
Are some counties more defensive than others as far as providing information?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and you can really even tell with just the person I'm corresponding with. Like I said, some people have been really great, have been like, this is such important work. I can't believe no one's doing this already. We're eager to hear the results of what comes out of this. Whereas, I've had to reach out to some people like 5 times. Or I think a big thing is kind of almost making me feel bad that I'm making this request, like as in, this is going to take us a long time to come up with this. You're going to need to give us some time or be patient with us because, this could take a while or, that type of thing. And as I mentioned in the presentation, there was the county that I had the biggest trouble with that were just, they sent me a fatality report, but I wanted to be like, this is all wrong information because we've seen the public record on this case and there was significant child protection history, but you're telling me that there isn't any. So.
And I would say, Maya, I don't know what your opinion on this, but from having dealt with counties, over a period of years, I would say that as usual, Hennepin County is a professional organization. They respond. They've got many cases that they had to do, so they're giving them to you in batches. But they do it like a real grown-up, institution. We have real differences of opinion about practice and policy in some regards, but they're always good to deal with. Whereas some other large counties, not to be named, haven't been as forthright or just trying to work with us. Would you say that? I don't know. Is that your experience with this?
Yeah, I would say that for sure.
So again, now I've worked in 2 states that are state supervised, county administered. Most states are not, but I have to have worked in 2 states that are. I worked at the county level in New York and at the state level in Massachusetts. In both of those situations, the state had much more of a strong oversight role. There was a much better set of checks and balances. There was a lot of consistency among the counties. You had to do certain things a certain way. So even though it was county run, there was just a much more organized feel to those 2 states when I was there. Whereas in Minnesota, it's like, it's a bit of a free for all. There's so much difference between how the counties operate. It's like having 84 little states rather than, 1 state with 84 counties. And this gives you, an insight into some of that.
Certainly a troubling situation. I appreciate hearing more
Absolutely.
this hour about that.
Well, we're hopeful that some really significant public policy issues will get, kind of daylighted through this report. And, we're excited about Maya's work and her being with us. And, it's just a real boon. So, well, we're just about out of time. If anybody has one more question, I'd be glad to field it. But then I think we want to hear your time and move on with the day.
I just want to thank you, Maya, for the good work. We'll be very, very interested in the final report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. I hope you have a great press conference when you're done with the report.
Well, we're going to ask you to help with that, Ellen. Well, I just want to thank everybody for showing up, and we really appreciate it. And hopefully we see you in 2 weeks when we have the Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain. You'll get to hear about that new resource for the state. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Maya.
Thank you.